You talk a lot about the red pill in A Voice for Men. What is the red pill?
Oh, it's sort of a cultural slogan. It comes from the movie The Matrix, where the character Neo is given the choice between a red pill and a blue pill.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And if he swallows the red pill, the scales will be peeled back from his eyes. He will see everything that he hasn't been able to see. And if he takes the blue pill, he'll just go back to sleep and live in his sort of unaware, semi-comatose state forever and probably be a lot happier.
Welcome back to Check the Facts. Today's topic is on the men's movement, where surprisingly, it's not the guys' concerns that are the problem. It's the backlash they get from feminists who believe that they are the only group of people on this planet who have absolutely no problems and no right to complain. The Red Pill is a documentary a level-headed feminist decided to undertake and find out for herself what is happening inside the men's movement. The backlash was so extreme that at one protest, the feminists decided to even start beating on the cops when this movie was scheduled for a showing. I have two thoughts on this. The first one is fear, that the concerns that these guys bring up are legitimate and feminists have a part in causing it, which would make them look very bad. The other one is hate, because if feminists don't get their way in this world, that means that they no longer dominate. So the only way to suppress the men's movement is to say that it's misogynistic and hateful, and then protest a documentary.
Okay, let's move on. And is this a setback for free speech? A controversial documentary on the men's rights movement has had screenings in Melbourne cancelled after a petition claimed the film was misogynistic propaganda. The Red Pill was made by a woman to look at whether feminism has demonised men for their masculinity. The filmmaker found many of the arguments from the men's rights movement convincing and reveals this in the documentary.
It's about men's rights activists, and there's a protest building up outside right now.
There are some people who are trying to screen this insanely sexist film, believing that they, the men, are oppressed. And we're here practicing our own freedom of speech to go protest that.
People just want to protect other people, and they protect those with the issues that are most salient. So unfortunately, because men tend to be really quiet about a lot of the things that affect them, we don't get the same level of...
Hey, stop staring at my face. Guys, do you want to talk about how feminism is cancer, how men really suffer?
It doesn't talk about how feminism is cancer.
They said that women on campus would feel physically threatened, I believe the phrasing was, by the showing of this film. And I'm sorry, but as a woman, that's incredibly patronising to me.
They're the same people who believe in Donald Trump. Like, do you really want to, see them around here?
A lot of the people who are riled about it actually haven't seen it. That's what the strange thing is. They associate men's rights and men's rights activists with misogyny and sexism and domestic violence, and all of that is totally untrue.
The music is so mesmerizing, it makes me feel like I am in an alternate universe. But what was so bad about this documentary that it had to be banned and protested? I strongly advise that you guys just take some time to watch it. It's free on Tubi TV. I'll leave the link in my description box below. I got curious, so I watched it. So I'm going to show you some clips from the documentary. I won't show you the whole thing or a lot because I want you guys to go and see it yourself, and also I have to comply with YouTube requirements. And if I show it for free, then it'll be taken down. So these are just a few clips.
A Voice for Men, an online hub for men's rights activists, and they were founded by a man named Paul Elam.
It's a gathering of women haters.
The Southern Poverty Law Center has classified that group and men's rights groups as hate groups.
He wrote a piece declaring the month of October to be Bash a Violent Month. I mean, literally to grab them by the hair and smack their face against the wall, he wrote.
I then discovered that Paul Elam's famous Bash a Violent article was written in response to this article by Jezebel called, "Have You Ever Beat Up a Boyfriend? 'Cause, we have." The article cited a study that revealed 70% of non-reciprocated violence was perpetuated by women. The author then went on to say that she conducted an informal survey at the office, and the gist of her findings was that many women had physically assaulted their man, and it was interpreted as either being funny or he was asking for it. I couldn't help but see the hypocrisy in a major feminist website making light of abusing men, and MRAs stinging back only to have the media paint them as the abusers.
We're here to fight how misogynistic think they have the right to oppress women. White men are starting to feel misplaced because women are sharing space. It's disgusting, and scroll the fuck up, and don't confuse suffrage with oppression. Everyone suffers. It's universal. I am a man, and I need feminism.
He is a man, and he needs feminism. He sure told us. He'd probably give me the same look he's giving the camera now. Suffrage is not about suffering. Suffer and suffrage are two different things. Suffer comes from the Latin to endure or to suffer. Suffrage is a vote of support.
Just consider this, that 93% of workplace fatalities are men. 4 of 5 suicides are men. Men are dropping out of higher education at very alarming rates. We're down to 38% now of college students are men, and it's dropping rapidly.
Male suicide, male abuse, male unemployment, male homelessness, male failure in education, male health issues.
We've got the paternity fraud issue, the wrongful paternity issue, a false allegation issue.
Men are sentenced to 63% more prison time for the same crime as women.
They're less likely to see a doctor. They're less likely to have health insurance.
The family court system truly is biased against men. I mean, there's just no question about it.
And it's really the pro-choice for women only movement, because men, they're denying men any kind of choice once a child is conceived.
Her body, her choice, right? Think about men. His body, his choice, not so much.
Because the U.S. government does not want to send you to die. They would rather send me to die.
To talk about those issues and address them in terms of how they affect men and boys as a group, people get hostile about it. The idea is that men have all the rights, they've always had the power. But if that's true, why can't men talk about their problems? And that's what really got me interested in this to begin with.
A cab driver who was driving a cab 70 hours a week was not saying, I am earning this money to have power over my wife. He was earning this money even though it took power away from his life. He was doing that so his child wouldn't have to drive that cab. The garbage collector does not get up at 3 or 4 in the morning in rain and sleet and snow and get out to do the garbage so he can have more power over his wife. That's power he's losing over his life in order to make his contribution, his sacrifice, his way of loving. And this has been translated into the culture of, you make more money than women do, you must therefore have more power. Every society that survived based on its ability to train its sons to be disposable. Disposable in war as warriors, disposable in work as firefighters, as workers on oil rigs and so on, coal miners, and indirectly therefore disposable as dads.
What happens in men's life when they're raised that they're worthless unless they're a provider, that they must work, even if they have to take on extremely dangerous work, they must get this done or they're useless as men? That is very, very powerful stuff.
See, feminism did see accurately that we value male work more than we value female work. But there's also the issue that we value female life more than we value male life. even when that plane went down in New York City a few years ago, and that, the pilot was a hero for the way he landed it and saved everybody.
Word arrived over the citywide fire frequency that a commercial jetliner was in the water with 155 people on board. Then, over the next few minutes, the doors opened, life vests were inflated, and women and children first, everyone got off that plane.
They saved all the women first. That's still, when I went on a cruise, there's still women into the lifeboats first, because you're a man, so you should be able to swim halfway across the ocean, but because you're a man, you're expendable.
As usual, I had to look into this. Like all my other videos, any research I do is posted on my research pages, which is in the description box. I will leave those links there. Check it out. It is for you guys to look at and see where I got my information, because there are no tricks here. You have access to everything I accessed. Let's start with the military. The red is women, the blue is men. There are more men in the military than women, according to a 2016 study, and these are numbers in case people like numbers instead of charts and bars. Firefighters. There are about 271,000 men and 14,000 women. CNN Business did an article about Erin Reagan, who is a firefighter. She says, "I realize that firefighting isn't for every girl, but most girls never even consider it to be a possibility." So she did this thing where she got a lot of girls to come in one day and see what it's like to be a firefighter and a girl. And she continues to say, "It wasn't a recruiting effort at all. We just wanted it to be a good education and possibility. They needed to see that you could be a girl and still do this." Whoever told them that they cannot do it? Who is planting these ideas inside these girls' heads? Because I doubt it's their fathers. Erin Reagan became a firefighter. Is she the rarest of them all? If a girl wants to be a firefighter, she could do it as long as she passes training. There's no big deal here. It's made out to be like it's a big deal. Look at this. According to 2016 General Construction Statistics, men in this field are about 9 million. Women are about 900,000. But did it ever occur to anyone at one point that women just do not like these fields? The biggest thing I have seen going on today is nail salons. They are opening everywhere, left and right, one after another, every corner, every street. And women go and get their nails done. Do you think that they're about to get jobs that cause them to get calloused hands, get their nails torn, ripped, whatever? Women have different likes. Yes, there are women in these fields, and yes, they could go and primp themselves too and look nice in these jobs. But the fact of the matter is that a majority of women just do not choose these fields, not because they are not allowed in them. Obviously, these women got in somehow, or else how else did they get in? Did they bribe someone? Did they cheat their way in? No, they did it like everyone else. So it's clear that you can get a job in these fields, but women don't want to. Why do you see more teachers that are women instead of guys? Why do you see more women in daycares? Why do you see more women as nurses? Why are there more women as receptionists? There are certain fields that women just choose. And what's even dumber is when feminists step up, and this includes guys too, and say that we need to get more women in these fields and we are fighting to make sure that they are getting in these fields. But the very first thing that has to happen is show of interest. No matter what kind of marketing you do, no matter how much you pay, women will not get into these fields if they do not have a heart for these fields. Look at Hollywood. They are trying to get more movie stars to take a part in movies that directors who are women are directing. I wonder why. There's not a great show of interest in this field, and on top of that, they're just really bad directors. They make bad movies. I have seen them. They stink. Of course, there is the exception. Not every single one. You will get that rare occasion where you get a really good movie from a female director. So now the agenda is to push movie stars to take a part in female directors' movies. Instead of them earning that spot, they are now going to freely get it. But what about the wage gap? I already talked about this in my previous video, the F word. If you haven't seen it, watch it. This article says, government data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Census Bureau tend to compare the wages of all women with a given job title against all men with a given job title, regardless of difference in geographic location, education, or years of experience. What does this mean when we see that women are making less in a certain field where their counterparts are making the full 100%? It means this. What's not taken into consideration is how long have each worked there. Is there such thing as seniority? What is the level of experience? Are there children involved and daycare? Because taking care of them can get in the way of hours at work. Did they both work part-time or full-time or anything else? If this job requires a degree, what level of degree do they have? And so on. None of this is taken into consideration. So when you see that women are making 81 cents on the dollar compared to a man, this is so broad and so general. And of course the media plays it up, puts it out there, and everyone thinks, oh my goodness, there's unfairness in pay. Be realistic here. Do you think that companies are going to put themselves in jeopardy? Because this can easily be taken to court if someone finds out that she is making less than a guy. Companies don't want bad publicity. By now, a lot of these laws from the 60s and 70s and 80s, they have taken full effect and are completely implemented. So stop with the wage gap. What about truck drivers? They're mostly guys, and they endure situations like this. They are the people who bring your products that you buy to the stores, your food to the stores, your clothes. They travel the US in all kinds of conditions just to meet their deadlines. Firefighters, mostly guys, because not all women want to end up in this situation. Construction, mostly guys again, because the heights are dangerous and they do die. Construction in the winter. Who is willing to take up the job in a bitter cold? These guys do. Or them. Most of them are guys, but not every girl wants to end up in this situation, where your friend and comrade gets shot. Or here, where it just keeps pouring on you. Or here, in the sweltering heat. Or here, not only getting up in the winter, but also collecting people's garbage in the winter. Do you think these people just get up and say, yay, I'm going to get shot today. I can't wait. I can't wait for it to rain on me. I can't wait to get frostbite. This will be so much fun. I love my job. They have their good days and their bad days, but most of them are guys because they are the ones willing to do it.
I'm watching this lecture that Warren Farrell's giving in the 90s. I see some women in the crowd, and a lot of them have their hands folded, and there is a little bit of uncomfortableness by being a woman in a crowd of people while the speaker's talking about how men are oppressed and women have it so great. It kind of puts you on the defensive as a woman. And understanding that I feel that way makes me wonder, are men having their arms crossed, listening to a feminist speaker talk about how men have all the power and women are oppressed? Are men feeling like, what are you talking about? I don't have power and we have it pretty shitty on this side of the grass too?
Women hold up half the sky. Women hold up half the sky. Women hold up half the sky. Warren Farrell! Warren Farrell! Warren Farrell! Warren Farrell! Warren Farrell! Warren Farrell! Warren Farrell!
In 2012, Dr. Warren Farrell was speaking on behalf of men's issues at the University of Toronto in Canada. A feminist group protested the event.
Be ashamed of yourself. You're scum. You are scum. Rape apologist, incest supporting, woman hating scum.
Is there someone else that can wait to
Scum. Yeah, just another.
I just want to listen to someone else's opinion. I'm not even on a side here. I just listen to as many people as I can.
You know what though? Why would you pay money to support a rape apologist if you weren't one?
Okay, so these are the only words she apparently knows. On top of that, this poor guy has never been to one of these conventions before, and he just wants to go and listen to see someone else's point of view. And she doesn't even want that. Scum! I didn't win my argument, so I have to close it with one more scum word. I cannot show the full clip because this is where the protesters get violent, especially with the cops, and YouTube protocol does not allow violence. So yeah, even a scuffle with cops is considered violent. But again, you can watch the full documentary on Tubi TV. It is free if you have an account. I think you're supposed to make an account, but I'm not sure. I think it's free even without an account.
serve? Who do you protect? Who do you serve? Who do you protect? Rage inside of me.
You hear about patriarchy, right? All the evils of the world's from patriarchy, but we're the ones dying. You know, and we die for you guys. You know, to protect our families, our friends.
In every society that's ever existed, women have had privilege and protection that men did not.
For example, we never hear about how men were excluded from the Forced Labor Convention of 1930 for years. The Forced Labor Convention was an international treaty that banned slavery and forced servitude, but it made an exception for able-bodied males ages 18 to 45. Eventually, they got rid of that, but there was still an exemption for prisoners and military, which is 90% male.
Stop pretending that you're oppressed and men are your oppressors. It's a lie, and it's a hurtful lie, and it's a hateful lie, and it's wrong.
If women are so different from men that men can't understand the female experience, we need to listen to women to describe it, then the male experience is so different from the female experience that you can't understand it. You need to listen to us. There was a case, the Serpico case. You might be too young to know the movie Serpico with Al Pacino. It was about a New York City undercover cop. He gets shot at the end of the movie and retires from the police force. And he was a real man, Frank Serpico. A woman after the movie, after this was made, decided she wanted to become a single mother and tricked him into fathering a child. And the court accepted that because she told her friends she was going to trick him, and they testified, and the court said, yes, you were tricked into it, and still awarded her over 90% of his police pension. So everything that he goes through in this movie to you know, including getting shot to earn his pension, she won by sleeping with him one night. My son's mom wanted to have children with me, and I had always refused, you know, saying, you have this anger problem, you need to get counseling, I'm not going to consider having children with you until that's dealt with, because she would lose her temper almost every day and just use any weapon she could, and like a child's the perfect weapon. So I was really definite about that. But she also used to proofread my articles for me. And I wrote an article for Playboy about Serpico. And when she read that, she told her friend she's going to trick me into fathering the child. She doesn't need my permission. And so that's how my son was conceived. Then she said, if you want to see your son, you have to stay in a relationship with me. But if you break up with me, I know all the things that a woman can do to a man. You know, she's read all my articles, she saw my talk shows. She said, I know all the things a woman can do to a man, and I'll do them to you. I saw her hold him by the shoulders and say, Daddy is a bad man. Daddy is a very bad man. And so he had to go through this long custody battle, and the decisions that they would make, you would just go, how? There couldn't be any explanation. You know, either they're absolute idiots or it's biased. There's just no other explanation for it. One other thing, his mom is obese and wanted him to be obese for various reasons. One thing is so he would identify more with her side of the family than mine, because we're all thin. Another was so that he would enjoy being with her more, because when he was at my house, he had to get activity, you know, and eat well-balanced meals and get his sleep and stuff. And at her house, they would bake brownies and stay up late and just watch TV. And so where would you, if you're a little kid, you know, where would you enjoy being more? But he self-reported to the mediator how upset he was about being obese, that the worst thing in school was when kids called him fatty, and how he cried. And his physician said that he's really concerned medically. And then what I did, he was at an age where he would imitate things that I would do. You know, I gave him a broken shaver, so when I shaved, he would pretend to shave. And what I did was I started weighing myself every morning and writing down my weight, the date and the weight. And I taught him how to read a scale. So he kept his own records. So I had 6 months worth of statistics to show consistently that every time he was with his mom for a few days, he'd come back weighing 3 or 4 pounds more, and then he'd lose it while he was with me. So they had, you know, that how much he was upset about the problem, they had his physician being upset about the problem, and they had the proof of where the problem lay. So the judge's decision was that father should no longer be allowed to weigh the child. Problem solved.
We generally know that fathers don't get as good a deal in family court, and we don't really complain about it until it happens to us. And even then, a lot of men don't.
Many men's rights activists come into being men's rights activists as a result of getting a divorce, wanting to be equally involved with the children, and realizing that women have the right to children and men have to fight for children.
When your family courts run on the supposition that mothers are more fit to be custodial parents, and that fathers are more fit to provide a check every month, and to become what we like to call Uncle Daddy, where they visit their children.
And some of this stuff ends up in horrific consequences. Like this gentleman here, it's his little son. They found him dead. Not the son, but the young man, in the desert with a bullet in his head. Day before the family court, where it became known that he was going to get to see his little guy even less. In the courts, he'd been falsely accused one time after another. It had destroyed his life. It had bankrupted him, it had driven him into debt. It had caused him to miss work. He was about ready to lose his job. He was in the end of his rope, so he just decided to end it.
I started to research some fathers' rights issues and came across some harrowing stories. Like this man in South Carolina who found out his only daughter was adopted away by the mother without his knowledge or consent.
His daughter was with an adoptive family in California, so he began his fight to get his daughter back.
Adoption is for children without families, not children with a willing and capable family.
And this man in Colorado who lost his daughter when the mother left the state to give birth in Utah, where he wouldn't have legal rights to his child. He fought for 4 years in court and finally won visitation rights. Only visitation.
I can't explain the emotion, the happiness, just this hard fight, and what this means to me.
And then there's this heartbreaking story.
The 20-year-old father never left her side until he was forced to give her to adoptive parents this week after Kaylee's mother decided to put her up for adoption. In order to keep Kaylee, Colby needed to file paternity action, an affidavit, and a commencement notice with Utah's Vital Records a day before the mother signed the adoption papers relinquishing her rights. But in Colby's case, the mother only gave him a few hours' notice of what she was going to do.
I would like her back. Men in the men's movement are not upset about having to be fathers. They're upset because they're not allowed to be fathers.
So if you're going to be having sex, and you haven't had this conversation with the woman that you're having sex with, you better have it. Better have it fast. That's when the man has the ability to make decisions, either not to engage in sex or to use condoms and to use other forms of contraception. So that's where his role comes in. Once he's impregnated her, she's the one now faced with continuing a pregnancy, faced with the health risks that accompany pregnancy. So his rights have to be exercised early. But once she's pregnant, all decisions must be hers, because ultimately she is the most impacted. There's just no question. And she ultimately has the responsibility for that child.
Dumbest, sexist, gender discriminatory argument I have ever heard. That baby is as much his as it is hers. Equal. There's clearly no equal rights here according to her, and no gender rights.
So before we were married, he promised me we would have 2 kids, and now he doesn't want any more. My friends think I should trick him and stop taking my birth control.
Men have never been in control of our bodies. We're the ones in control. Clap if you think that she should trick him. My people. Up next, everybody.
Like this man who is facing jail time for failure to pay child support for a child that DNA tests prove isn't his.
Carnell Alexander still owes more than $30,000 to the state for a child that's not his because the mom wrote his name down because she needed to name someone in order to get welfare benefits.
And I had to put him down as the father. That was the only way I can get assistance.
I'm almost homeless. I'm almost in jail. I'm out of work. My money is being threatened to be taken.
He says the law needs to be changed so when this happens, as it often does, other men don't become dad by default.
She hit me in the face. She actually hit me throughout the house, chasing me throughout the house. When I reported my domestic assault to the police officers, I did not at all bring up the fact that I was sexually assaulted, because if he wasn't going to believe that I was a victim of domestic violence, there was no way he was going to believe that I was going to be a victim of sexual assault.
I mean, I can't tell you at this point how many guys I've talked to who are like, yeah, you know, she stabbed me and they put me in jail. Not only are there endless studies that show women are just as violent as men are, when I would talk about it, invariably, men would start coming out of the woodwork with stories. Stories they were afraid to tell, stories that they got laughed at for, stories that they got blamed for. It's hideous.
My best friend that I grew up with since kindergarten was being physically abused by his wife, who he'd been married to for 20 years. She'll break glass and throw it at him, punch him. I've seen it just happen spontaneously, and it was frequent. And he's bigger than her, but he didn't want to hit her. And he didn't want the children, they had 3 minor children, he didn't want them seeing this at all. So he would usually just go outside because there would be glass breaking or things being smashed or yelling, and he knew that the neighbors might think it's him. So he would go outside so the neighbors can see what's happening. Eventually I said, look, you need professional help, and so does she, and maybe the kids do too. So I called a bunch of domestic violence shelters. I just looked around online and I called, but every place that I called said, we don't help men. We don't help male men at all. And I started becoming curious about why that was, because I learned that these were state-funded shelters. And I know that men pay at least half of the taxes that fund these shelters if they're state-funded. And I just was wondering why. Basically, there was no place to take him, and it just continued. The problem just kept going.
In the United States, there are over 2,000 domestic violence shelters. All of them serve female victims, and nearly all of them turn away male victims. In fact, as of 2016, there's only a single domestic violence shelter for men. My initial reaction was that there needed to be thousands more women's shelters because that many more women are being battered. But as it turns out, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will be victims of physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Sure, there's a slight majority of female victims, but how can that excuse denying men help? Couldn't this be considered gender discrimination? Think of it this way. Roughly 78% of all suicides are men. If suicide prevention services only served men, wouldn't we see the gender discrimination immediately? If there are over 2,000 women's shelters that turn away men, and only 1 shelter for men, obviously the resources don't match the need. In 2014, the CDC released a report revealing that over 5.4 million men and 4.7 million women had been victims of intimate partner physical violence within the previous 12 months. But then why does the media paint domestic violence as a women's issue?
The World Health Organization says 1 in 3 women are abused by their partner.
1 in 3 American women experiences domestic violence or stalking at some point in her life.
The entire domestic violence industry was founded on that. I think it's still 37 or 32 states in the United States that by law they have to use the Duluth model for battery intervention programs, and it's all shame, blame, and guilt driven. If you're a man and you walk in, you must admit you did it up front or you're in denial. There's no debate, there's no discussion, there's no possibility that you could be falsely accused. The criminal justice system could have made a mistake. None whatsoever. You are in a state of denial, and you will complete that course or you're going to go to jail. You will be re-engineered.
That's frightening.
Frightening?
Yes, that's frightening.
I think it's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
All I had to do, I had a simple choice. I could just say, yes, you're right. Men are the enemy. No problem. But I couldn't. I absolutely couldn't.
Just getting overwhelmed. Because I don't know where I'm headed with what I believe and what is right and what is wrong and who is wrong and who is right, and the truth is somewhere in the middle, and that's why I'm feeling frustrated, because I don't know where the truth is, and I don't know
Part of what I do and what I research and what I think about is the reason psychologically why feminism seems to be such a comfortable, warm blanket emotionally for so many people, men and women alike. And it's so comfortable that it will make them not see things that are right in front of their face. Look at Boko Haram.
Hundreds of young girls, fast asleep in their beds, are awakened by the sound of gunfire. Armed attackers have stormed their boarding school and set fire to dozens of buildings. Nearly 300 of them are dragged from their dorm, loaded onto trucks, and carried away deep into the forest.
From New York to London rallied yesterday demanding that the terrorist group Boko Haram bring back our girls. It just gets to the core of you.
This unconscionable act was committed by a terrorist group determined to keep these girls from getting an education. And what happened in Nigeria was not an isolated incident. It is a story we see every day as girls around the world risk their lives to pursue their ambitions.
I mean, you must have heard about that, right? That's being spun as a fundamentalist Islamic group that is so determined to be misogynistic and oppress girls that they want to deny girls an education. But they are not against girls being educated. They're against anybody getting a Western secular or Christian education. The initial attacks, and there were several of them, there were over 100 men killed and 1 woman killed. And the victims were described as people, right, or villagers. And in the previous attacks on the schools, they actually let the girls go. They separated out the boys and girls, and they let the girls go, and they told them, go home, get married, renounce your sins, and live a righteous life under Allah, right? And then they burned the boys alive. There was literally no outrage, right? It was barely reported on. It was one of those things, there was no opinion pieces on it, no nothing, right? Until the girls were kidnapped. And look at it this way, because we played right into their hands, because they want attention, right? And they weren't getting any attention from the Western media when they were just slaughtering boys, right? They want attention. And what do? They kidnap girls and sell them into marriage or slavery, right? And everybody, the UN, Michelle Obama, Barack Obama, the UK government, the Canadian Federal Minister of Defense, right? They're all promising aid and help and equipment and personnel to help find these girls and bring them back, because this is such an outrage and oh my goodness, something needs to be done. Well, maybe if, like last year, maybe if we did something then, all of these girls would be safe in their dorms right now. Right? But we didn't. And the reason why they kidnapped those girls is because we didn't do anything. We didn't pay attention. And they want attention. Right? And they know that attacking girls or women is going to get them attention. What are we going to do? Start a campaign, bring back our boys. Oh wait, they're dead. Never mind. Right? The men, the people in Boko Haram, they're chivalrous. If those girls were boys, they wouldn't be getting education. They'd be dead. They wouldn't be sold into slavery with the hope of escape. They'd be dead.
Finally, brethren, after a while,
At least 69 dead, although some reports put the number at about 150 and scores more injured.
for that day when we shall lay down our burden and study war no more. Finally, brethren, after a while, the battle will be over. For that day when we shall lay down our burden and study war no more. Finally, brethren, after a while, the battle will be over. For that day when we shall lay down our burden and study war no more. Finally, brethren, after a while, the battle will be over. For that day when we shall lay down our burden and study war no more. Finally, brethren, after a while, the battle will be over. For that day when we shall lay down our burden and study war no more.
It's one thing when you look at what happens to women and you feel normal, healthy outrage about it, and that should happen. But when you can look at what's happening in our courts to men, in our medical establishment to men, in our schools to men, and yet we remain so cerebral about all of it. Yes, well, that is certainly something to consider. If it were happening to any other group, we would be having protests from coast to coast. And the fact is that it is happening to men every day right in front of our eyes, and people will get angry at you if you try to talk about it. That's how deep the prejudice runs.
But there have been protests, not with the intention of shining light on men's issues, but rather with the goal of silencing any discussion of men's issues. Like at Ottawa University, when Professor Janice Fiamengo attempted to give a lecture that questioned the feminist narrative.
So you think this is a victory? Yeah, why are you so frightened of hearing an opinion different from your own?
Then there was the first international conference on men's issues in Michigan, where even Ms. Magazine urged its readers to protest the conference in hopes of shutting it down. But perhaps the most well-known protest of a pro-men's rights event happened in April 2013 at the University of Toronto, when the Canadian Association for Equality hosted a discussion titled "From Misogyny and Misandry to Intersexual Dialogue."
But in my 20s, when I went to Columbia to study art history, and that was in '68, and that was the height of the academy. And so suddenly I was confronted with the direct possibility of being drafted for that. And I discussed that with
A feminist group protesting the event illegally pulled the fire alarm and successfully shut down the event.
When feminism says that they have no part in any of this, I think they're not being honest about it. I don't blame feminism for all of it, but I think they've had a role in it. They've written laws that discriminate against men. They fought to protect those laws, particularly in domestic violence areas. And for many, many years, second wave feminism would go through the statutes and change everything that was gender specific to something gender neutral, unless it was something that benefited women, like the domestic violence laws. They didn't change those. Other types of areas like fathers in prison, there's statutes that specifically give mothers certain benefits that fathers in prison don't have. And I challenged that as well legally, but we didn't win on that one.
When I wanted to get a commission on men, like the county has a commission on women, the feminists fought that tooth and nail. When Prop 209 was before the California voters, which was to end affirmative action, every feminist organization opposed it.
Every time men's rights groups try to pass joint custody legislation, feminist groups fight them. They fought us on paternity fraud.
The biggest opposition that I have faced has been from the radical feminists that said, we don't want truth to be the standard, because if we did, they wouldn't oppose automatic DNA testing at birth. And in countries like France, they're saying, well, DNA should mean do not ask, because it's now illegal to even get a test. And if you get a test without the mother's permission, you will be criminally prosecuted.
The commandant of the Marine Corps said that he thinks, and I quote, all eligible and qualified men and women should register for the draft, talking about selective service. Do you think women should also have to register for selective service like men?
I have to think about whether I think it's necessary to go as far as our military officers are recommending. The idea of having everybody register concerns me a little bit unless we have a better idea of where that's going to come out. Where I want people to register, I want every young person to register at the age of 18 to be able to vote automatically. And I think
Boys are falling behind in education. They are enrolling at lower rates and earning less college degrees. And while not all MRAs agree on the issue of infant male circumcision, most MRAs do believe it is a human rights violation. I spent months learning about infant male circumcision, but it only took me watching a 5-minute medical training video to convince me this is a barbaric practice that needs to stop.
This is not in the documentary. This is something separate. There's a guy here who brought up men's issues at this conference, and there's a feminist in the room, Jessie Phillips, who, as a reflex, just started laughing because to her it is ridiculous and preposterous that men could ever possibly have issues. It's only a feminist thing. Only feminists have the problems. Only feminists have the issues. Only feminists have the concerns. Never men.
My pitch is a fairly straightforward one, in the sense that every year since I can remember, certainly since I've been a member of this House, which is 10 years now, we've had an annual debate, and in the last few years this committee has granted one. In fact, I think I was on the committee when it did grant the debate for International Women's Day, and that's been held every single year. And so I thought that in the spirit of gender equality, it would only be right to have a debate to commemorate International Men's Day, which conveniently falls on Thursday the 19th of November, which is a date when you may or may not have some time to allocate, so it will be very fitting. Because, of course, not only do we have International Women's Day, we also have women and equality questions every month in the Chamber, which we don't have for men. So the opportunity for men to raise issues that are important to them is very limited. And just to give you a flavour, Mr. Chairman, of the type of things that may come up and which will be part of International Men's Day, I'm not entirely sure why it's so humorous, but to discuss issues such as men's shorter life expectancy, wider male health issues, many of which go unreported through embarrassment of men to sort of go along and talk about these things, the high suicide rate amongst men, the propensity for violence against men. There's many male victims of domestic violence, again, as something that goes very much unreported because of lots of embarrassment about it. The underachievement of boys in education compared to girls, the issues around father-child relationships, and often the way that fathers sometimes feel they don't get a fair crack of the whip in terms of custody of their children and things like that.
2 closing remarks. Why do I not like feminists of today, the third wave feminists, and why are they making men's issues such a problem? I don't like today's feminists not because someone told me not to like them, not because of speeches I have heard or rallies I have seen. When I was growing up in the early 2000s, I kept hearing about the feminist movement. I didn't think too much of it then because I never classified myself as a feminist. But I noticed that they were complaining about things that they absolutely had rights to, so I questioned it for myself. It's just something I observed. I always knew there was a problem, but it just so happens for the first time I'm actually voicing my opinion about it. I noticed that they could wear whatever they wanted. They could get jobs wherever they wanted. They can freely go wherever they wanted. They could drive cars, they could vote, and yet they kept saying they did not have equal rights, so I knew that something was wrong. As for the second one, if the men's movement becomes a big deal and it starts to raise more awareness, it'll take away the security, the benefits, and the pedestal which feminists have propped themselves on. They will no longer have the advantage that they do. The one thing I would like to say about the men's movement is that I hope it does not become as out of control as the feminist movement, because then we're going to have 2 very big and different problems, more than we already have now. I hope these guys keep a clear head and will not behave like the feminists I've seen at rallies and protests. Please leave a comment below on what you think, not only about the red pill, but about the men's movement. Subscribe, give me a thumbs up if you like, and please share.
Educate yourself!